Sweet. Okay. Welcome everybody. Tonight, I'm very pleased to introduce Sarah Sargent to present about Erie Bird Observatory, keeping tabs on birds in northwestern Pennsylvania. I'm so excited to have her because this is exactly one of the topics that I most wanted to hear about personally, and one of the first ideas that I had for an educational webinar about birds of Pennsylvania, because Erie is such a cool place. Erie Bird Observatory is such a cool organization, at least by my judge of coolness. It's definitely upper echelon of Pennsylvania birding. Dr. Sarah Sargent has spent over 35 years working on avian ecology and conservation. In 2018, she co-founded Erie Bird Observatory and served as its executive director until 2025. Prior to that, she spent over 10 years with Audubon, Pennsylvania, the state office of National Audubon Society, developing and implementing bird conservation programs in northwestern Pennsylvania. She previously conducted research on frugivory and seed dispersal by birds in South Carolina and Costa Rica. Her educational background includes a BA in biology from Swarthmore College and MS and PhD degrees in ecology and evolutionary biology from Cornell University. As an undergraduate, she spent a summer as an intern at Manomet Bird Observatory, a formative experience leading her to a lifetime of studying birds. She currently serves on the executive committee of the Association of Field Ornithologists and the Ornithological Technical Committee of the PA Biological Survey. I'm sure if we were all in a room together, we'd all applaud for you, Sarah. But please take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Joe. Yes, I kind of feel like I am overdue for giving a talk like this to this organization, and I'm really glad you asked me to do it. That said, it's going to be hard. I've spent the last couple days and before that trying to put together exactly what I want to say. And honestly, we do a lot of different things at EBO, so I'm really not going to, it's not really possible to put it all into a single talk. So I'm going to do the best I can and sort of do a bit of an overview, and then delve into a couple of our projects more in depth. And hopefully that'll do the job. So yeah, Joe asked me to do this, and as I said, I'm really glad to do it, and I'm happy to have a chance to kind of share some of the work that we've been doing up here, this part of the state, and with everybody throughout the state. And I know many of you do get up to Erie at least occasionally, and that's great. It is one of the, I like to say it's the best birding destination in Pennsylvania, but I'm sure there would be other people that might disagree. So Erie Bird Observatory is not very old. Let's see, is it gonna go slide 2? There we go. Just so you know, we are a young organization. We were founded in 2018. And the three of us, Sarah Sargent, Mary Birdsong, Laura Marie Koich, were the three founders. And we decided, you know what, we really do need to have a bird observatory somewhere in Pennsylvania. But moreover, the northwest corner is, after I had worked for Audubon, Pennsylvania, and they laid me off, I really felt very strongly that this was something that needed to happen. And we've got a couple sort of bird-focused organizations elsewhere in the state. We've got Hawk Mountain, then we've got Powder Mill. But I felt like there was definitely room for another one. And that's what happened. So in January 2018, we started it up, although I had been working, as Joe mentioned, on other projects, and some of the same projects, and I didn't really want to see them go under. So that's really partly what happened. But the idea of a bird observatory, I know people are not that familiar with them, but I mentioned in the introduction, or Joe mentioned, that I had been an intern as an undergraduate at Manomet Bird Observatory, which has changed their name. They are now Manomet Conservation Science Center. I can't remember if they have a name that has more words to it now. It's not a bird observatory, but it was at the time. And really, I think bird observatories are cool organizations, and there are quite a few of them around the world. And so anyway, we've gone with the bird observatory. Who knows, 50 years from now, somebody may decide they need to change that name and call it Erie something else, Center for Conservation Science or something. I don't know. Um, but the idea is that there's a couple functions we do. We do research, we do education, we do conservation. And our mission is to really foster enthusiasm, get people connected to nature through birds. And get them excited about doing conservation work and learning more about the natural world. And birds are, as we know, of course, the people in this audience, birds are really excellent at getting people to pay attention to the natural world around us. And so that's really what our goal is, and we want to continue to do. Uh, in a lot of ways, I feel like a lot of conservation work needs to be fairly local so that people who live in the area, who visit the area, can appreciate it and understand it and take actions at that scale. And so having a huge conservation organization like National Audubon is okay, and it's part of the picture, but sometimes getting down to the local regional scale can be more effective, I think. And so that's what we're trying to do. Let's see. Meet our staff. As Joe mentioned, we do have I was the executive director for until earlier this year, but we just hired in March of this year. Our new executive director, Holly Short, started working for us. She came to us from Florida. So this is going to be her first winter living in Erie, Pennsylvania. And she does think she has enough clothing. I don't know. We'll see how well she how well she lasts. So we also have myself, of course, and now my job title is Director of Conservation. This Mary Birdsong is our lead shorebird monitor, and she's been focusing on the piping plover work whole time. Laura Marie Koich, many of you would have met her if you've visited our banding station, and she is our banding program manager, the lead bird bander. And Katie Anderson is, let me just see, is that not showing up? Oh yeah, there she is. Okay. She does a lot of our bird walks and, well, all our bird walks, basically. And she is also our PSO, Piping Hot Plovers is our Blitz team, and she is the kind of the cornerstone and the organizer for the Blitz team that we do every June. And so she's very knowledgeable about birds in the Erie area. So those are our primary people, but we also have a bunch of people that come and go on a shorter, more seasonal basis who assist with various things like a bird banding assistant for spring and fall, and educational assistant who works at the banding station. And we often have an intern every summer, and we've had other people who do shorter term things for us. So this is kind of an overview of some of the projects that we work on a regular basis. The morning flight migration count. We've been conducting it, and this is a program I'm going to talk about in more detail. That is at the Tom Ridge Center, Tom Ridge Environmental Center. So if you see TREC, that's the acronym for the Tom Ridge Environmental Center. There is a 5-story tower that is attached to the building, and I'll go into more depth on that. We started this in 2021. So it's something that's definitely started under Erie Bird Observatory. I am going to also go into more depth about the bird banding program we conduct at Fry's Landing, and its history and some of its projects we've done with that. Then I'm going to delve into a lot of detail on the piping plover nesting monitoring that we do out at Gull Point. But I did want to just briefly say, there's some other stuff we have been doing. The marsh bird monitoring in the wetlands at Presque Isle, and we've did several years of monitoring for Bird Safe Erie, sort of a lights out program. And we've just started this last summer with a sort of the gull nesting colonies on the roofs of Erie. project trying to monitor and protect, reduce the level of mortality of the chicks that are um, hatched on those rooftops. And so there's some other stuff that we're involved with in our region. But I'm really going to focus on these first three items: morning flight, bird banding, and then the piping plovers. Let's see. So, yes, the first one is going to be morning flight at the Trek Tower. And as I mentioned, it is a fairly new thing. And this is Jason Wojcik. Wojcik. I always have trouble saying his name. But Jason this was totally on him. He came up with this. He really wanted to do this. I had originally hired him to do a bunch of duck counts and water bird monitoring for a few years on a seasonal basis. But he said, you know what, the tower there is perfect. It's absolutely perfect for flyby counts of during spring migration. And so he has been doing it most years. We did not have funding. So the first year was 2021. We did not have funding in 2022. Then we've gotten funding since then to hire him back. And so he does it. He's really an expert at doing this. He does it daily, starting in mid-February and goes through the end of May, sometimes a little bit into June if it seems like there's still some movement going on. All of the counts that he does are available on the Tractella website. And it's extremely cold up there and windy if you've ever been up there. But I'll just go into a little bit of the details of what he does and some of the results for the program. So this is the Tom Ridge Center Tower. Many of you have been there. It's got this platform. This isn't the best picture, but it's the one I had. It's got you can take an elevator up, and then you can walk all the way around and get this really cool views out over the peninsula and into the lake, and of course into the city. You can see the roller coaster right next door, the Waldemere Park, and it's really cool. But in addition to being a tower that's 75 feet tall, it's also sitting on top of a bluff that's along the lake edge. And so here's kind of a bit of a bird's eye view from up like 1,000 feet. I can't remember what I had the elevation at this is Google Earth. But this is sort of the edge of the lake has this bluff, sandy, gravelly bluff that's like 50 feet tall or more, it varies a little bit. And then it has these little creeks that are kind of eroded through and go down into the water. But the tower is actually, it's sitting at kind of right behind in from the bluff edge, not very, very far. And if you zoom even further back and you look at where Erie is and where this site is, it's on the edge of one of the Great Lakes, Lake Erie. And in spring migration, what happens is birds come, pouring up from the south. They come up like the Mississippi River Valley. And then they peel off and some of them are heading towards, Quebec and Maine and even upstate New York and so forth. And what happens is they're coming up this way. This is Cleveland. You can see the big gray blob there. They end up sometimes shying away from crossing open water, and they funnel along the cliff, along the shoreline. And actually, they're getting a bit of a lift from the bluff too. And when you're up on this platform, going back to the Tom Ridge Center, many of them are not that much higher than you. You can see them really well, and they're just going right by. And it's really cool place to be. So anybody who wants to see migration happening in real time, get up on top of the platform at the Tom Ridge Center and visit with Jason during his morning flight counting between February and end of May. So here's what he does. We have these fancy tally counters. He manages to keep track of a whole bunch of different species at the same time by having these little buttons you push, and you can count up lots of different species at the same time. And then every hour you write it down how many, this is like the way you do a hawk count or a sea watch count. For those of you who visited Cape May or one of the many hawk watches in Pennsylvania, this is a pretty standard protocol. You've got your list of species and then you've got the hours. And we do southeast versus northwest. Sorry, northeast versus south, coming from the south, the way the shoreline goes. They're either going towards Buffalo or they're going towards Cleve, basically. And so those get counted separately, um, and tallied up separately. And this is what it looks like. You get to have warm clothing. You get the table. He's got the bar stools up there. He's got the bunch of different tally counters with different species labels on them, so he can track a lot of things. And then he's got, the optics, usually just using binoculars, also taking pictures. And then, yeah, you want to have people come come visit with you. This is Jennifer Ferrick, who's another birder in the area. So this is what happens. And here's some of the results for over the past few years. Checktellin is a really good place. It is kind of a home for a lot of migration counts that people do around the world. And so this is information you can get by looking at our site on Checktellin. This first year, he didn't think he started early enough because right away there were some big days. And so in subsequent years, he tries to start a little earlier, but it really does depend on the weather and the fronts that move through. And so the fronts can start arriving and the birds are, they're moving with the tailwinds. The big numbers do happen early. The big numbers are in March. And also it's important to remember that this is a diurnal. These are birds that are migrating in diurnally, not nocturnally. In the very early morning, you'll get some of the nocturnal species that are still traveling in the early morning around dawn. But for this early part of the season, when the big flocks are going through, it is birds that are moving during the daytime. The nocturnal migration becomes more prominent once you get into late April and into May, and the diurnal migrant numbers are dropping off by that point. Just kind of an interesting phenomenon. So this is sort of an hourly averages through the season for spring. But as I mentioned, it's kind of cool that, oops, wait a minute, how do I do it? There it is, okay. So this is just a day by day view of this for 1 year. And that you can see there are these little waves that happen, and that is all weather driven. And so the weather makes a huge, huge difference for these birds. That there's a few days of good weather with tailwinds, then, the air shifts around, big front, cold front comes in or a high pressure system comes and sits in one place and there's not the movement. And then the next wave of about 4 or 5 days will, decent traveling weather will come and so forth. So it's kind of an interesting pattern. And that daily pattern has gotten a little bit obscured by looking at just these weekly averages here. And this is the average number of birds per hour per week. So this is all kind of smoothed out. Anyhow, that's kind of what it looks like. And what the question is, what are these birds? What species are we looking at? And this is the breakdown here. The red-winged blackbirds and those big, big, big pushes early in the season. There's huge numbers of red-winged blackbirds. This is common, and that number, I have it here, 300. So these are the numbers for 2025, and there were 393,261 red-winged blackbirds counted. So that's a lot. That's more than 250,000 red-winged blackbirds alone. Same with the common common grackles here. So the next largest number was 372,000 approximately. And then, yeah, starlings, a pretty significant group, 86,000. This is Blackbird sp. So this is ones he wasn't confident enough to call. They were blackbirds, another type. So all of these are all blackbirds. Very large proportion of these numbers are blackbirds. And this this light blue one though is blue jays. We get a huge amount of blue jays passing along the shoreline. It's pretty impressive. And this same with the robins, bluebirds and blue jays and robins are really significant numbers. They're the blue jays was 48,000 and the robins was 45,000 approximately. So they're really cool because you can see them. If you're at Presque Isle, you will see flocks of blue jays going along the shoreline. Um, turkey vultures is this next, the dark blue, and Erie gets incredible numbers of turkey vultures flying, and they are really definitely riding that lift from the bluff. Water, the wind is coming off the water, hitting the land and getting deflected upwards, and the turkey vultures are just using that to go north. Then there's brown-headed cowbirds, pretty good numbers of rusty blackbirds, and they are distinctive enough you can see them. Herring gulls, and then all the other species mixed together. That last segment there. So it's pretty cool to look at that, and of course we can look at there's a ton of detail in there too, daily patterns and the seasonal patterns and the timing of the different species that I'm just, not going to talk about right now. So that's all I guess I was going to say on the morning flight counts. It is really a cool site, and I do encourage you to come visit if you get a chance in that time frame. Make sure to go up to the Trek Tower if you're there in the morning, and it's a decent weather day. He doesn't. Jason has gotten really good at determining whether there's going to be any movement or not on any given day based on the weather. He can look at the weather forecast and maps and say, oh yeah, nothing's going to move today, so he does not go up on those days. But those big movements are really exciting if you're there on a day like that. So the next one I was going to talk about, and this will be familiar to many of you, I think, is the bird banding at Fry's Landing. And this is something that has been going on for a very long time. First, let me just mention, I know this audience probably is very familiar with what bird banding is, but just in case there's a few people that are not, this is migration bird banding, so we're not banning ducks or game birds. We're banning land birds, songbirds, and their allies, using these mist nets, they're called, and it's a passive netting system. The birds will fly in from the side because they don't see it, very hard to see head on, and they're carefully extracted, and then they're taken to where we put on the little bands. These are aluminum bands. They come in different sizes, and they each have an individual number. And then you record some data from the bird that you put the band onto, and then you let it go again. And so it is one of the sort of standard means of doing a long-term monitoring of bird populations and seasonality of migration, and has been going on for quite some time. And actually at Presque Isle is one of the places where bird banding has been going on since 1960. The Levermans, Ron, Bob, and their mother Mary started bird banding at Presque Isle in 1960. And then Bob Leverman famously was hired by the Carnegie Museum of Natural Sciences and went to Powder Mill and began the bird banding program at Powder Mill Avian Research Center, what it's called now. Not sure it was called that when he started there. But his brother Ron continued to do the bird banding at Presque Isle all the way up until June of 2006. Um, Overall, under their permit that they had, there were 46,000 birds banded in that time span, which is a long time. Um, Shortly, like within a year, or actually just a little over a year now that I look at it, the Stoll family also began doing bird banding at Presque Isle in pretty much an adjacent site. And they did, that was Jean and Jim Stoll. This is Jean showing a bird to a bunch of visiting visitors and explaining the bird banding process and teaching them about birds. And Jean typically would stay at the banding station table and do the educating. And Jim, this is Jim over here, he would go out and check the nets and manage all the extractions. That's what I understand. They were no longer there by the time I arrived on the scene. But many people still visit Presque Isle and ask about, have fond memories of having learned about bird banding from Jean Still. So my part is I started I have a banding permit, and we started banding under my permit in 2007 with Audubon, Pennsylvania. And over the years, and actually the park had asked me about it when I was hired by Audubon, and I said, yeah, I can do banding. And it was right after Ron Leverman did his last season of banding. So they were eager to have somebody pick up the program and continue it, which I was happy to do because I do really like bird banding. It is very fun and it is very exciting, and you get to see birds up close and in person, and you never know what you're going to catch. So it can be, and it's very, very educational. And so we've been doing it spring every year since 2007. For a while, we didn't have funding for fall. Spring is a more exciting season at Presque Isle because of the way the birds move up and hit the lake, which is interesting. It's in contrast to a place like Cape May, which many of you may be familiar with on the other side, on the eastern part of the state. You might get down to Cape May. That's a place where there's a lot of birds that pile up down there in the fall because of the way they're migrating, hitting the Atlantic coast and then hitting the Cape May Peninsula as they move southwards. We kind of have the opposite pattern here at Presque Isle. Birds are heading northwards. Presque Isle is a sand spit, and it is a migrant trap. So spring is definitely the more exciting season for us for bird banding and for a lot of bird migration, in fact. But we do both seasons, spring and fall at this point. And we really do make a point of having public visiting hours. We used to be more casual about it. People could just stop in any time, but then we found, well, we get the same people visiting all the time. We wanted to make sure new people came and got some exposure to, and learned about birds by visiting us. So we've been promoting it more and getting a lot more visitors actually through this outreach. So it's a form of outreach and education. We do typically have about 4 hours a day on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at this point. We also do various research projects. We've been putting little nanotags and MODIS type tags on certain species and looking at how they travel either over or around Lake Erie during spring migration. And over the last year and continuing next year, we're going to be looking collecting fecal samples and looking at doing metabarcoding, looking at the diet and the orders and families of insects that are being eaten by the birds to look at how much of their diet is coming from aquatic groups of insects, which would be kind of interesting. So what else? Just some banding totals for the last 5 years. Like I said, we do spring and we do fall. Number of days that we're open. One of the things about Presque Isle is the weather is extremely variable and can be very very, very windy. And if it's too cold, too windy, or there's precipitation, we can't operate mist nets under those conditions. So it's pretty variable. This spring was another year where we had a really low number of days that we could open because the weather was just very cold for very long, and then it was very windy, a lot of storms. And so it's kind of predictable for us, the number of days that we have any hours when we're open. MNH means mist net hours. It's like a measure of effort. And so it is a bit variable because we don't because of the weather factor at Presque Isle. We're out on the peninsula. We're very vulnerable to all the weather that happens on the lake. So the number of new bands, new is how many birds we banded with new bands, as opposed to recaptures, recap birds. You know, oftentimes when you band a bird, it stays in the area. Maybe it's on migration, and so maybe refueling, and it'll stay around for maybe a week, and we may recapture it during that week. And so the recaps are typically birds that we have banded within within a week or two. Sometimes though, they are the breeding birds that breed right around our banding station, and they come back every year. So we have some recaptures of some fairly old birds. We've had some birds that are 8, 9, 10 years old who are local breeders who come back every year. And so it is very exciting for us, of course, when we get these birds to come back. And we greet them in the spring and say, hey, you're back. So it's kind of fun. We also do release birds unbanded sometimes. So in order to get a true capture rate of how many total birds we get captured, we add those in as well. We don't ban hummingbirds at this site. And there are times when there's too many birds come in too fast, and we just let some go to unbanded so that we don't want to hold them too long. We don't have that many people. So we will let birds go unbanded on really busy days. So this typically we get slightly more species in spring than we do in fall. Yeah, the recapture rate is another kind of interesting thing, and it can range between about 15 to 30% birds will get recaptured. And so, again, this data goes to the bird banding lab. Many researchers have access to it, and so we don't, do all the data. We collect the data, but then it goes into the big database in the sky, and other people have access as well. I did mention briefly the data tagging. This is a project we did for a number of years. Haven't done it for 2 years now. Well, actually, no, last year, 2024 was our last year of it. But we would attach a small radio tag. And this is a transmitter. It's emitting a little radio beep every 10 seconds. We typically do ours and every 10 seconds. And then there's all these different listening stations, essentially, that are tuned to that frequency. And they can identify the individual bird by the pattern or the signal that's emitted. And so we've done nanotagging on about 5 or 6 different species total. And again, we were kind of looking at the way when they leave Presque Isle, do they go across the lake, or do they go around the lake up the side towards Buffalo? And different species do different things. It turns out most of the blackpolls will cross the lake, and the biggest push is they're heading up here and onwards, presumably. The density of the listening stations is very high in Ontario, but it's not nearly as high in other places. That's because the whole Motus network was originated in Ontario. And so there's more of these listening stations there than in other places. Let's see. So we've done, like I said, we've done a bunch of different, well, half a dozen different species. This is one of the other interesting ones. The northern water thrushes, we've done 15 tags. And again, they're all just heading up this way. They definitely are crossing the lake more often than not. They don't seem to be deterred by crossing the lake. Smaller species seem to have a little more caution about crossing the lake. Um, anyway, so I think that's all I was going to say about our bird banding station. We don't have any of the diet results yet. We've collected samples, but haven't done the analyses. Collaborating with Allegheny College, Jen Houts at Allegheny College, with that project. So the next thing I was going to talk about is piping plovers. And this is always a fun topic to talk about the piping plovers. And it's always exciting. First off, I have to say, this is a massive effort that is in partnership with a whole bunch of other people. We don't do this alone, and we couldn't do it alone, and we wouldn't do it alone. So it's a major effort because Great Lakes piping plovers are on the endangered species list. And I believe right now they are the only species of birds on the endangered species, federally endangered in Pennsylvania at this time, although others pass through or over. These are the only breeding ones in the state. So it's a massive effort. Many different agencies collaborate on this, and Erie Bird Observatory is contracted actually under with the Game Commission with federal funding to work on these guys. And they're just, of course, the cutest things. And I know as birders, many of you want to be sure to see them and like to come to Presque Isle just to see them. And I think that's great. Just to review the piping plovers in general, there are three distinct populations. The Atlantic coast one, which many of you I'm sure have seen. If you go to the coast in the summertime, you may see them there. And then there's this inland population that nests on these gravel riverbeds and islands, major rivers in the central part of the continent here. The Great Lakes population is the smallest of the three different populations, and it is the one that is endangered. And I'll show you the numbers. They're very low. There are more of the piping plovers on the Atlantic coast and the inland area are both considered threatened federally, but not endangered. So we have the endangered species, which is why there's all these agencies involved in managing them. Historically, they nested all around at many sites around the Great Lakes, including many sites around Lake Erie. However, during the minimum part, the lowest point in their population in the late 1980s, mid to late 1980s, the range of the Great Lakes, their nesting sites was reduced to just this area, very far eastern Lake Superior and northern Lake Michigan. And that is kind of still the core of their population at this time. But they have been recolonizing a bunch of those historic sites. This is what the number of pairs that are known, and most of them are known throughout the Great Lakes. When they were put on the endangered species list, back in here, the beginning of this graph, there were fewer than 20 pairs, and that was true for a number of years. Two different things started contributing to management interventions started being done early on then in the late 80s, early 90s, one of which was the use of exclosures around their nests to prevent predators from just eating the eggs off the ground. These guys are like very similar to killdeer. They just nest right on the ground, and they've zero protection from anything. And so they're very vulnerable. And so having an exclosure, and I'll show you what they look like in a little while here. It's basically a fence around the nest to keep out things like raccoons, and it is covered over the top, so uh, avian predators can't get in either. Um, so just having exposures really boosts their success. And then this captive rearing program at the Detroit Zoo started up early on then too. Um, and here's the population climb started happening after these interventions started happening. The thing is, they have to happen every year. It's not something like you could just do it once and it's fixed, and they take care of themselves from then on. Putting up exclosures is pretty labor intensive. You got to find a nest, you got to find it early enough before it gets eaten, and you got to put the fence up. And the captive rearing is also very labor intensive and also time sensitive, that if a parent is lost, the eggs will not hatch and the chicks will not survive because it requires two adults. Each nest requires two adults. A single parent cannot incubate enough and cannot protect the chicks enough. And so if a parent is lost to predation during the breeding season, eggs will go into the captive rearing program to be hatched out and raised and then released at a release site in northern Michigan. So that's an important component in their protection too. So what do we actually do? Oh, whoops. Oh yeah, here. This is where they returned to Presque Isle and Lake Erie in 2017. It was the first nesting we had in our area since probably 50 or 60 years. Nobody really knows when the last nest at Presque Isle was. So it's exciting that we do have them here. We are the only regular site within the Lake Erie watershed. Part of the listing process is to designate critical habitats areas. And so there are, I believe it's 37 or 38 critical habitat segments around the Great Lakes. And one of them is our segment here, Presque Isle. It is from the lighthouse on the west side all the way out to Olive Gull Point out here. And so this is considered critical habitat. I will say this whole big kind of bite out that's been eroding away in here, this started happening after they built all these breakwaters, because now the current kind of swirls around and is cutting in here, but depositing out here. So it's made it so this area is not good habitat. But on the other hand, this area is now even better habitat because it's a deposition zone as opposed to the erosion zone here. So we have this habitat, and that is part of what Erie Bird Observatory does. We are hired to monitor that critical habitat area every year, and we look at CHA's critical habitat area. We start doing basically daily or 6 days a week monitoring on April 15th. We go through June 30th for the entire critical habitat area, because that's the period of time when it is possible that a nest could be initiated. After that time, there are still birds typically now out at Gull Point, and so we continue to monitor any known nests and fledglings and so forth out there after June 30th. So what the monitors do is they go out and they look for the presence of plovers anywhere within that critical habitat area. Now, we have not been seeing them at the lighthouse to Beach 10, but we do see them at Gull Point. It is quite a bit better quality habitat for them. So they know that, they go there. So we look for the presence of the plovers, and we look for potential threats. So we are looking for signs of predators as well. What we do is we document the band combinations. The Great Lakes population is almost entirely has color bands on their legs, so we can identify individuals. It is a small population. There's only 80 some pairs, and all the chicks get banded every year pretty much. So we try to document who's here, And then we observe behaviors. We want to look for territorial behaviors. We're looking for courtship display. We're looking for nesting behavior, the scrapes that they make. And this is an example of a nest with 3 eggs. They typically do lay 4, just like a killdeer or some of the other shorebirds do. Um, the eggs are pretty well camouflaged, and it can be basically the birds are too, the adult birds. Finding a nest is a big part of our job for Erie Bird Observatory monitors, um, because we want to be able to protect the nests from the predators. So we need to try to find the nests as soon as they start laying eggs. Ideally, they don't incubate full time until typically until the nest is complete, the clutch is complete. But we want to, if possible, we start paying attention to where they're spending their time. Are they going? They will do a little bit of incubation early on with the incomplete clutch. So we have to be very, very observant of their behavior, and they tend to be pretty sneaky about going to their nests. Any of you who've watched nesting birds will know, they can be pretty sneaky about getting in and out, going onto the nest. It's really important that we find them. So that's what we do. And the use of the exclosures, like I said, it's really, really important for these birds. This is an incubating female, male actually, that is very well camouflaged. So that's the other thing. You can't really even see the birds once they're sitting on the nest incubating. You really got to see them coming or going, and it can be very, very tricky. Um, anyway, so the camouflage is their only defense. Both the adults and the eggs are very vulnerable at this stage, because eggs are extremely easy to eat for just about anything. Everything will eat the eggs. Once EBO finds a nest, the Game Commission personnel will lead the installation of the exclosure. And that's what this is. This is it's a wire cage, and this particular one has these like zip ties on the top to deter roosting by gulls or anything else. We don't want things sitting on top of it. And so the edges get buried. They're all busy burying around the edges here. And there's also going to be these an apron, it's called, that sticks out and is under the sand because opossums will dig under. We did lose a nest a few years ago to an opossum that did dig under the edge. And so got to bury this apron, get the mesh, the wire frame in there. And this is a slightly different version than we often have. We usually do the kind that has like fence posts at the corners, and then netting around or metal woven wire fencing, and then netting on the top. But this is a different model we tried this year. The mesh of the woven wire is big enough for the adult piping plovers to go in and out. So it's important. The piping plovers can go in and out. They're actually not that big. So the wire mesh is intended to only keep out predators, not the parents. Okay. And then you get these cute little fluffy pom-poms that run around. And once we get them enclosed, we have to make sure the parents are both present every day and attending the nests. And so we look for a nest exchange between the adults. And then once we establish that for each nest, we're good. Then after the chicks hatch, we do a head count and try to identify how many chicks are there, because we're looking for chick survival too. We're trying to identify each and every chick once they're hatched. And they do start running around when they're quite small because they are precocial. And so we will continue, as EBO personnel, continue to monitor every day until that we have 3 days with no more piping plovers. And so that tends to be sometime later in August, when all of the adults will leave before the chicks, and the chicks will stay on a little longer, continue to get a little fatter. And then they will eventually fly away and migrate south. So over the last 9 years, we have had a total of 17 nests, um, had 74 eggs, had 42 wild chicks that were fledged, or I won't say they were hatched at Gull Point. Only 33 are known to have fledged. And we did end up sending quite a few eggs over to the captive rearing program in several years. There was some interesting soap opera dynamics going on in these years. Um, Things settled down. Actually, 2023, we had predation of 2 adults. It was a major problem that year, and that led to relaying and more nests. And so that's why there were so many nests that year. This other year was that one male tried to have multiple nests at the same time, and anyway, it's always a soap opera out there. But we really are very proud of the joint efforts of the whole team and all the agencies. And the EBO people feel very close to these birds, and because we see them every day, and we notice their personalities, and they really are pretty cool. This guy over here is one from this summer, and was pretty outgoing character. It was a lot of fun to kind of get to know them. And but we never know who's going to come back or whether we'll see them again. We do get reports through the sighting network. If you see plovers during the wintertime, and try to get the band combination, and those black bands on our birds do have little white numbers on them that are very hard to read. But if you get a chance, do try to document birds you see and report them to plover at umn.edu, University of Minnesota. And we are very hopeful that there will be 10. We are planning a huge celebration for next year, because next year will be our 10th year of nesting of piping plovers at Presque Isle. So we're planning, along with the other partners, especially the Game Commission and DCNR, the park personnel, we're going to have what we're calling the Plover Nest Fest at Presque Isle. So put this on and save the date. Put this on your calendar. Dr. Francine Cuthbert is a real expert in this species. She's retired now from University of Minnesota, but she's going to come talk at our event, and this will be on July 18th. So put that on your calendars now. More details will be forthcoming, so look for more information. The Plover Nest Fest, we're going to do it. Anyway, I think that I'm going to wrapping things up here. It's been a long time. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. Like I said, I could go on and on about other things. I didn't even brush on the marsh birds. We do have leaf bitterns in decent numbers at Presque Isle. They have declined. We're speculating on why that is. We have done work with Bird Safe Erie and Lights Out in Erie. Like I mentioned before, we have the Erie Gold Task Force now that we're working with some partners, including Tamarack Wildlife Center, the city of Erie, on trying to figure out better ways to manage the gulls that are on the rooftops. But I'm going to wrap it up. Please do think about signing up for an e-newsletter. It's free. Just go to our website, look for the sign up button. We put out a monthly newsletter of various programs and events that are coming up, and other things to do, like encouraging people to participate in the breeding bird, or I shouldn't say breeding bird, it's the Bird Atlas, and doing Christmas bird counts. And we do provide a lot of bird walks and other things. We have work days at Presque Isle. You can become a volunteer. This coming year, we are planning to do some work with the bank swallows that nest along the beaches at Presque Isle. And so we're going to be looking for volunteers to spend time on the beach. It's not going to be too tough of an assignment, I don't think. It should be good. But please also consider donating. We're not calling people members anymore. We're calling people donors. So please consider being a donor And you can always go to our website and find information on becoming a donor. Any time of year is good for birds. So as always, get on out there and just enjoy the birds, I guess. Um, you can contact us through any of these means. Do follow us on Facebook. We're pretty active on Facebook. It does go over to Instagram, I believe. You can email us. You can go to our website and get our newsletter, like I said. So lots of ways to keep in touch. Um, hope you'll do that. And then I am pretty much done. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Sarah. What a vast array of fantastic work. I admire it a lot. Um,
Thanks.
I hope that people will chime in with questions. I don't know if you can see it, Sarah, but Bob Melville um, already put one question in when you were talking about the morning flight. Um, are you seeing that? Where you?
No, I can't. I don't have the right thing up. Maybe I
It
should.
might be
I'm not
easier if
sure.
you ended your screen share,
Okay. Yeah, I
because
can do
the
that.
Zoom controls kind of hide when you're in presentation mode.
Right. Okay.
But Bob
Okay.
Bob could either he said, "Aren't there more waterbirds seen from the tower?" And I mean, compared to blackbirds, I mean, to get that high
Yeah.
in the ranking.
Right. Interestingly, there's a couple thousand Canada geese. The ducks are not coming up over the tower, you know. And I think that they'd be more, they are not, yeah, there's not. It's interesting. There really aren't that many. The herring gulls, showed up as one of the top tens this year. Just barely though. They were the lowest of the top 10 species. Um, so it's interesting. There's just not as many numbers. You'd think that there would be, but they really are not going within eyesight of the tower. So
We also have a
odd.
question from Julia. She said, "I think you mentioned that at one point there were only 20 nesting pairs of piping plovers around the Great Lakes. Are the current birds nesting around the lakes descendants of those birds or of new birds from other areas started nesting in the Great Lakes?"
Yeah, there were less than 20. I think it was 15 or something. But definitely they are all descendants of those original, uh, that small set of pairs. There is some movement between the three populations of piping plovers. Um, there's been genetic analyses and other things estimating that like once every 10 years or something, there is a bird that will move from the Atlantic population into the Great Lakes population, for example. There was one banded Great Lakes bird that did show up over in Massachusetts that I know of. So it can happen. But by and large, these birds are distinct in their where they go. It's funny because they mix together in the wintering grounds. And so the three different populations will mix together, they are spread from Texas to the Bahamas and down into the Caribbean and various islands over the winter time or the non-breeding season. But during the breeding season, they go back to where they came from, basically the population. I mean, they don't go back exactly to the same beach. We have had, because our birds at Presque Isle are color banded, we know if one of them comes back and is a breeder in a subsequent year. And we do have offspring of our original founding male who have come back and been breeders at Presque Isle. And one of the males this past year was the grandson of our first breeding male. So it is kind of neat to be able to follow the family histories of some of these birds. But yes, the birds and the 85 pairs we had this year, all of them are descendants um, from the original founding set of 15.
Do you think that there's enough habitat for more pairs on the peninsula, or do you think that with how territorial they are, that they've sort of filled the niche to the extent that there's habitat?
I think there's room. Yeah, there's room for more. That and the Gull Point has grown substantially over the 20 years that I've been walking out there. It's quite a bit bigger now than it was because of that deposition that keeps happening. But the other thing is like this year, the two pairs were really close to the nest sites were really close to each other. They were, of course, that was the best area of habitat. They really prefer it with no vegetation, really bare. And so the more vegetation there is, the less attractive it is to them. And so it really needs to be pretty naked. Um, and they want really long sight distances, so they don't want to have they want to be able to see a predator coming. And basically they need really open chat. And so as soon as it starts getting closed up, they don't like it. And they won't nest there. But so yeah, the two nests this year were pretty close together, but there was still tons of other adjacent area that could have had more nests. Yeah, I think there definitely could be more nests.
Are any other locations doing vegetation management to keep things open for them?
Um, a few years ago, I went over to Mentor, Ohio. They have one of the designated areas there, critical habitat areas there. And they are talking to, they wanted me to come look at it and compare. And I said, sure, sure. And there's way too much vegetation. And that's what I told them. They unfortunately don't have a deposition, an area. They don't have the natural geological processes like we have at Gull Point, where there's fresh deposition happening every year. Oh, new sand is getting put down. They don't have that. And that's really well, we have this tremendous advantage in that we don't have to engineer it. We don't have to maintain that. We do actually. There's a lot of. I should mention. There is active vegetation management that goes on at Presque Isle at Gull Point every year. With Western Pennsylvania contributes this part of it. They do a drone. Western Pennsylvania Conservancy does a drone flight to map the area every year now. And then they also come back in late summer and do a lot of vegetation control after the piping plovers have left. In early fall, they will do application of herbicides. That's at a time when the plants are taking things into their root systems and it will kill things. If we didn't do that, Gull Point would have a lot of trees on it. The cottonwood the seeds wash up and they form these belts on the beaches and start growing. And that is a really essential thing, that there is vegetation control that happens every year at Gull Point to try to keep the tree line back. Yeah. So yeah.
Cool. Um, I know we're past 8, but I could seriously talk as long as you can. I saw Jason
I did
started to do some migration monitoring out at Gull Point over the summer.
in the
Is
fall. Yeah.
Yeah, is that likely to ever happen again? That was so cool.
I he wanted to do it this through the whole fall. I wish I had funding for it. He's kind of broke. He doesn't have money. He needs to be
EVO needs more donations, is what we should be saying.
absolutely, yes. Yes, we do. And I yes, he was going to do more this fall than he did. He did a lot in September this year, and he aspires to do a lot more, and he really feels that Gold
If he
Point is the
if he
place
could
to do
count
it.
year round, it would be so productive.
It would be, it would be. I would love to have him here full time.
Yeah.
It is very hard to come up with financial support for that.
I understand.
really enough for somebody to live on,
Yeah.
it's tough. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great. And he's phenomenal. He's just really phenomenal.
I,
And yeah.
so some of my best birding experiences of my life have been by his side. I've had
Is that
great
right?
luck. I've had great luck being there. I saw you had a photo of Baltimore Oriole, and
Mhm.
I was there for the like
Oh,
previously
yeah.
the eBird high count for PA was like 75 on one checklist, and we counted more than 400.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another
Yep.
day we had the high count for eastern bluebirds for the state on eBird, so that
It's
just
really
you have
exciting. On a good day on that tower, stuff is just streaming by. It's just
yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
really, really, really fun. I wish I was closer. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I would be there so much more.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really, really fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks Sarah so much
Yeah.
for
Anybody,
sharing with us.
feel free to reach out by email or by any other means if you think of something later. I'm um happy to talk to anybody. So, and thanks for
Great.
inviting me, Joe. Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks everybody who attended. And if any of this was interesting, you'll see in the PSO newsletter and the email list and the Discord that there's going to be a release of the recording from tonight. So thanks all, and best wishes to you as the holidays come.
Thanks. Happy holidays.
Cool. Bye, Sarah.
Okay. Bye bye.